afternoon, viewers, and welcome. Sarge, Danny Purple Rose Shoes. Stay tuned. We'll take a break and be right back. Welcome back to the studio. If you've just joined us, you're watching Listen. Today in studio, we're going to talk about who is an adolescent. Are you sure you have the right information to identify the adolescent, to be able to give them the right details and guidance they need? In studio with me are two very well-informed professional, Dr. Newman Arthur and Dr. Topa. They'll be joining me in studio today to discuss in fully who an adolescent is. We're going to take it from the biological, psychological, and social. Dr. Newman Arthur and Dr. Topa studio.
Thank you.
A lot of people talk about adolescents, but do we know who they are? Do we have the right information to guide them? Do we have the right information to teach them? And also to equip them with the details they need to be able to take the right path. So when we say adolescent, what do we mean? Who is an adolescent, Doctor?
So let me start from this angle that physically we grow, psychologically we grow, socially we grow, spiritually too we grow.
Okay.
So there are various stages of life. We have children, we have adolescents, then we have adults. So adolescents usually begin from the age of 10 to 19. And that period is characterized by a lot of things, which I'm sure we're going to go into. So basically, when you see an adolescent, we're looking at a certain age group between the ages of 10 and 19. Yes.
Between the ages of 10 and 19.
Yes.
That's interesting because a few parents, mothers I know, tend to say that, oh, my son is only 10 and he's become shy. When he becomes an adolescent, I don't know what will become of him.
The eyes of
10.
So it's very difficult for you to even give some advice or medical. You can't really, because in the eyes of a parent, you are that baby boy, baby girl to all their lives. So they put people in that perspective. So they may not actually deal with ages and consider how every age reflects in their ability, their level of functioning. And so in the eyes of parents, you may even be 50. And so far as your parent is alive, they see you still as that boy or that girl. They
should be giving you pocket money all the time then.
Yeah, so that's it.
So for the age, adolescence starts from 10.
Yes.
And ends at
19.
19.
Yes.
So for the parents who are watching, they are not adolescents only when they become teenagers, because that's the perception some of the parents have.
Yes.
So they start dealing with them, they kind of categorize the information or how they deal with it. It's from age 10 to 19. 10 to 19, not teenage, not the teenage phase.
Yes.
It starts from age 10 to 19.
Yes.
Now, when we talk about biological, Dr. Topa, let's start with the female adolescent. When we say an adolescent biologically, what do we mean?
Okay, thank you very much. So just to add a little bit to the earlier question about the age issue. So yes, the age category we're looking at.
Okay.
But even what we know is that in reality, some children actually start their puberty earlier, especially girls.
Okay.
So you can actually have girls, and puberty is the stage where you having the beginning of the development of the secondary sexual characteristics.
Okay.
So in girls, it is marked mainly by the development of their breast, and then their menses when they begin to have their menses.
Okay.
And clearly, we know it can happen 2 to 3 years all the secondary sexual development.
As young as 8?
8, yes,
Wow.
and 9. So parents also need groups just for easy understanding. The first stage, which is from the age 10 to 14, that is really when you have a significant physical change.
That's age 10 to 14.
That's the first phase,
Okay.
the first phase of the adolescent period.
Okay.
So that's when, for girls, significantly, you will see the breast development, and then significantly, they will have growth of hair under the armpit, and then around the genital area.
Okay.
And then eventually, they will have their period or their menses. So that's the significant physical changes you would see. Generally, you would see an increased growth. They will grow taller, they will grow bigger. It's like you have a growth spurt at that point. For the boys, the significant things you will find is still the physical changes. So essentially, you have the breaking of the voice, where the voice gets deeper than the childhood voice that they had.
So the breaking of the voice,
Yes.
can it happen earlier? As in the girls, sometimes you have them at age 8, they already start showing signs and start menstruating. So with the boys, is it possible that it can happen earlier as well?
Yes, it's possible. We have something we call precocious puberty.
Okay.
Where
Sorry,
people...
can you let it not be so technical so that my
Yes,
viewers will
exactly.
understand?
So what I'm just trying to say is that some children develop their puberty earlier than the known ages that we know.
All right.
So yes, you can have the breaking of the voice earlier in some boys.
So when we say earlier,
Yeah, so still looking around the age of 8, 9 years, okay, as we mentioned earlier. But significantly, the development is earlier in girls than in boys. So as I mentioned earlier, these developments we're talking about, these physical developments, commonly we're looking at from 10 years onwards. And the first phase, as I mentioned, is from 10 to 14 years. That's when you would see it for most people. But it can be earlier in some girls.
Let me just announce my WhatsApp line so that anybody who has questions can send them. My WhatsApp number is 020-723-3302. The number again is 0207-723-3302. You can send in your messages, your questions, and we will discuss it live on it. We're streaming live on YouTube. Also, you can get us on GoTV channel 175 and DSTV channel 362. Sorry, Dr. Tupa.
Yes, so I was saying that so for the biological changes, the main one we have is the physical changes, and that you see during the first phase, during age 10 to 14. Then in the second phase, that is during the age 15 to 17, that's when the physical growth slows down. So the physical changes that you see begins to slow down within the second phase.
I'm going to take you back to the girls.
Okay.
We run a couple of programs for girls, and when we come to the topic of puberty and the changes, I think sometimes they're a bit confused. For example, you get a young girl telling you that my face is suddenly very oily. She doesn't understand it. You find that they're getting a trimmer, waistline, their hips are broadened. Can you give us more information on that? Because that's an area too that parents don't seem to have enough information to also tell them about.
Yes, so as I mentioned, during this first phase, the significant thing is the physical changes.
Yeah.
So for girls, just as you rightly said, they would have that change in their physical structure.
Okay.
They will grow taller. The body shape will become to get defined.
Okay.
So then you have all the changes that go with it. And significantly, because of the hormonal changes that go along this period, a lot of them will tend to suffer from acne.
Right.
And it's just because of the hormonal changes that are also going on during this phase. So it's also the period where, as you said, some will have mentioned that they've noticed their face have become
very
oily or they actually suffer from acne, commonly what we call pimples. And it's something that also tends to affect their self-confidence alongside. So it's important, once we understand these physical changes, then we can be able to relate it to all that they have to deal with as adolescents.
Okay.
Yes. So you have these physical changes, the growth spurt, as well as the hormonal changes, which are also going on within this period. And all that culminates in the child, that is a girl child, beginning to have her menses as well during this period, in addition to the changes in the breast and the breast getting bigger. So you see all that happening in the girls during this period.
Okay. Now, again, with the girls,
Yes.
Sometimes you find that some of them start the menses and it stops.
Yes.
And it doesn't come again for about a year.
Yes.
Is that a challenge?
No, that is normal.
Okay.
That is normal. So the menses, which is the physical aspect of the changes, the hormonal changes that are going in the body. So because it's a phase that the body is going through, they haven't peaked yet. The hormones are still trying to have a fair balance. So it's normal for most girls to start and you have that break on and off. It's similar to what happens at the end of the cycle when women are going into their menopause. It just doesn't cease. You also begin to have the hormonal changes. And so at that stage, you would realize that the period becomes irregular again, all because that physical aspect of the bleeding is as a result of the changes in the hormonal levels. And because that is not yet settled or stable at that early age, so they would have that fluctuation in the period. So it happens for a number of them.
The acne,
Yes.
when they end the adolescent phase, will it
Yes.
stop? Or for some people, it doesn't?
Well, yeah, so for a lot of people, it gets better. And unless other factors have come into play, they will get over it. But for a few people, it's a problem they still have to grapple with, even into adulthood. But majority, that phase, they go through that phase and then they move on. Yes.
Dr. Newman, for a young girl going through all of this, what's her psychological state of mind?
So I spoke earlier on that there are physical changes. You know, when there's physical change, you see person size and also, weight and all that. So physical growth is made possible when people feed, nutrition plus protection from infections and diseases, actually. So everybody has the natural, ability to grow. So a child will grow. Physically, they will. It's something that you don't really have to put in much effort. You see that growth. In the same way, psychologically, they're growing. Psychological growth, we may not be able to see it like physical changes, but you are able to see it through people's behaviors and expressions. So depending on how an adolescent is behaving, you can actually know their level of psychological growth. And so most of these psychological changes is actually based on the fact that there's a brain up there that also goes through some kind of changes and is responsible for the child's ability to handle information and to be able to cope and adjust to the environment.
This is during the adolescent phase.
So children grow. So there's a stage with kids where they are more, sensory, perception and touching stuff, and they're able to, identify colors and make sense out of colors. So they may not be able to even know it's yellow. As they grow older, they may know it's yellow. They may know it's red. Then at some stage, they may have to, associate things with symbols. So, for example, if you say a doctor, you may have to show someone in a lab coat so that they may be able to create that kind of linkages.
Yes.
And as they grow older, they are now able to assign meaning to whatever they're able to see, and also be able to interpret and have their own understanding based on previous information. So during the childhood stage, now children even up to 19, but during the early phase of childhood, we give them a certain kind of information, and that information becomes the basis for their own, assessment or evaluation of situations, even in adolescence. So adolescents, are not made overnight. Psychologically, adolescents are made from childhood because they only build on that information and acquire new information. But most of their interpretations is based on what they've been hearing or seeing, whilst they were younger. So adolescents have a certain perception about life based on what they've been exposed to whilst they're growing up. That is the first point. The second is that as they get to adolescent age, they are able to now assign meaning and interpretations and linkages between things. So around that stage, three things really basically happens. The formation of their own identity. Two, learning how to be independent. What it means is that when they see something, they make up their mind about it, and they are able to say that this is what I want, this is what I don't want. And that situation is what creates conflict between parents and
And the
adolescents.
adolescents.
Because at that point, they are now able to make sense. You see, if you tell a child, maybe 6, 7, if you tell them something, they would agree without even questioning. Because their brain cannot question what you're telling them. It's not that they don't want to question, but they can't pick what you're saying. They can't really have a certain understanding or independence as to what they're thinking about. Okay. But for adolescents, their brain has matured to a point where whatever you tell them, they are able to have a certain understanding based on previous information or new information. Then they're able to question that information to actually cause whichever linkages they need to cause together, and be able to make sense for themselves. Not based on what you said, but based on their interpretations and the meanings they are assigning themselves.
They have their own interpretation.
They have their own interpretation about it.
So when mommy is saying kill means A,
yeah,
they are saying kill means 1, 2, 3.
Yes, because now the brain has matured to a point where it can have that kind of conversation. Okay. So I said their identity, about who they are, their potentials, what they can become, and how they see themselves in the light of what others are telling them, and based on what they've also discovered about themselves. Then also the next thing has to do with independence. Where now they want to be independent because now they can actually move around. They actually make sense out of their own world in a way that they themselves would find, okay for them.
When so you say independence make sense out of their own world, what is their own world?
So adolescents' world is based on what parents have created for them, okay, in addition to what they see. So they go to school, they see things. They watch television, they see things. They, what do you call it? They maybe be on social media, they see things. That is their world.
They are on social media. They live there.
So that is their world. And they're able to compare and contrast, be able to do this and that, and create a perception for themselves, what they think would help them achieve whatever goals they have.
Okay.
Yes.
So for an adolescent female who is going through this menstrual cycle, all the body changes, what are some of the things that, mentally, what are they thinking, what are they going through? Because I remember I met a young girl who said she didn't want to menstruate anymore, so we should let it stop. And obviously, she's not happy with something about it, or she doesn't have the right information. So how do you let it stop? So obviously, she's going through some state of mind. So for a young girl at that age, what is her mindset with the changes? And I think they get excited when their waist becomes smaller and they start getting bigger hips. But when they're going through the menstrual cycle, those who are going through the pain, what is her state of mind, and how can the parent help?
Yeah, so generally, whenever there's change, there should be adjustments, yes, based on those changes.
Okay.
And every change causes some significant distress, depending on what those changes are. Okay. Imagine you're there one day, you wake up and you start bleeding. Yeah. And if you don't have information, if you don't have an information about it, it becomes difficult. And for example, probably you were in school, in class, and you started bleeding in class. It's quite new. So any major change for anybody causes significant distress. Yeah. And also, you would have to, it comes with some form of anxiety, because you may not even be comfortable or convinced or sure or certain about how it's going to turn out to be. So based on how you've been raised, based on the information you have, it is able to help you cope and adjust. A person's ability to cope and adjust is a function of their mental capacity. Yeah. So if parents from childhood, they're teaching their kids about the things they need to know or hear, they're able to help them to be able to cope and adjust to situations, it becomes part of them. So new changes helps them cope and adjust. But if you have a kid who is not being taught how to cope and adjust to anything, parents keep doing things for them, they don't give them the right information. On top of it, if they have some kind of stressful situations in their lives while growing up, like any form of abuse, can be sexual, physical, verbal, whatever the abuse is, it becomes part of their psychology. And it makes them, the ability to cope and adjust situations very, very difficult. Very difficult. So every response is based on what has been happening, over the years. Yeah. So a person's psychology is not developed overnight. It's developed daily, so based on their various experiences. So an empowered child before 10 is able to go through the adolescent phase, easier than someone who has not been empowered to be able to handle major changes.
Right.
So it comes with its own stresses, its own adjustments, its own anxieties. And if they also have some major problems in their lives, it may be overwhelming. And around that time, you have to be in JSS, all the work and all that.
Carry a heavy bag on your back and go
so
to
a child
school.
who has been neglected, a child who has not been trained well or empowered well, may have all these things happening to them. It's a lot of stress for them. And if the society is also not, the acceptance in the society or at home is not also good, and they stigmatize or make negative statements about adolescents and what girls go through. Some people even laugh at you when you start menstruating and all that.
Yes.
They may make all kinds of comments and all that. All those things may add up to all the things that they have to go through around that time.
Dr. Sopa, before we move swiftly to the
Right.
boys, I remember during one of our radio programs, the doctor mentioned that even for the adolescent girl, there is a particular way that the pubic hair must grow. And it's supposed to grow straight and spread. And if it scatters, then it means that it's got side effects or it's going to give them repercussions later in life. Is that the case? And how can the mother help?
Okay, so thank you. So just to add this aspect to it. So we were talking about the physical growth,
Yes.
which is important, what we see. In relation to your question, we have what we know as the male hair pattern and then the female hair pattern. So
Right.
clearly there are differences in what you expect. Okay. So for a growing up child, girl, boy, there will definitely be differences. However, the rates of differences will vary. Just as we've said, all the other cycles, some girls may begin their cycle earlier. But essentially, it doesn't have much of an adverse effect on the person.
Okay.
So that is it. So there will be differences, but in terms of that, it doesn't have much of an adverse effect. But let me just make this point, which I think it's important as part of the physical development. So though physically the body is growing, it's looking more like that of an adult, the growth of the brain is a bit slower. And so brain growth, the brain actually gets to its full growth or potential actually around the age of 24. So in other words, what it means is that that function or growth is a little bit behind the physical growth. And what that means for the adolescent is that though physically they will be looking like an adult, in terms of the ability to make decisions, in terms of the abilities to handle behavior, in terms of the ability to handle their emotions will clearly be different from that of the adults. And sometimes that is why we have some of those challenges in terms of the adults. So they're looking like an adult, but in terms of their decision making, they can make poor decisions sometimes.
This means that as parents, we're scolding them when we shouldn't be, but we should be understanding that their mind is not, the brain is not developed to understand or appreciate or synchronize certain things.
Yes. As parents or as adults, we've all been through the adolescent phase.
We never remember.
Well,
we never remember.
No, but if we look back, we will see the challenges we had at that stage. We will. The disagreements we had with our parents, with the older adults and all that. If we really look back, we will. And so the important thing is to understand the adolescent and the changes they are going through. And if we really pay attention to that, we will be able to handle them better. Because as he said, as Newman said, they are struggling with a lot of changes. They are actually trying to find their new identity. I'm no longer a child. I'm supposed to, and I'm not even an adult yet. Yeah. So it's a difficult area they find themselves. And so these challenges are there, and parents really need to understand. When we understand, then we would be able to help them in all the challenges that they have, in all the areas that they have, including the young girls, how to be able to handle their emotions in relation to their menses and all the experiences that go with it. So paying attention to that aspect is something we neglect most of the time because we're just looking at the physical body. He looks big, he looks like an adult, yes, and so he should act like an adult. But clearly, when it comes to their decision-making, handling information, and other aspects of their emotions as well, it is clearly not fully mature like that of the adult yet.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to find out if parents really, truly have all the information they need to be a good parent to an adolescent. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the studio. If you've just joined us, you're watching Listen. Before we went on the break, we were talking about the biological and the psychological changes of the adolescent. But before we go back to Dr. Topa, there are a few questions we have here. Dr. Topa, there's a lady who sent a message. She says, my girl is at age 6. She started growing pubic hair. Is that normal?
So I mentioned that though we looked at the age bracket of 10 to 19, that it begins for most people at 10, some could have it 2 to 3 years earlier. So that backtracking could be 8, 7 years, 6 years, a little bit too early, but that is still possible. So it could be normal, but I mentioned also earlier a technical word, which is the precocious puberty. Yes. So for such a child, it would just be good for them to let someone have a look, but it could happen earlier than the 10 years, as we've seen.
This, what was the word again? The technical term you use?
Early puberty.
Early puberty. 6 years, early puberty. Is it because of something they're eating, or is it something that is hereditary?
So it's a condition which is it's endocrine related. So it's a medical condition that they would have to look into and assess. So it's a medical condition that can happen. Yes.
Okay. There's another question here. She says, how do you recover from depression as an adolescent girl, Dr. Newman?
Well, it's a whole topic on its own. It can't.
Yes,
it can't.
It's another show.
Yes, it's another show. So what I would advise is that she should just walk into the hospital and seek the help of a clinical psychologist.
In the case where she can't walk into a hospital.
Or any hospital at all, because first you need to find out why.
Okay.
Then based on the why, you can suggest the outcome. And there are multiple approaches to handle depression. Sometimes we have to start with medications first. Sometimes you have to combine medication with psychotherapy. Sometimes psychotherapy alone will help. And depending on the specific issues relating to that particular type of depression, then we can...
So depression has different types?
Yeah, we have...
In adolescents?
Yes, depression is depression, but there are different types of depression. Okay. Right? There are some depressive, episodes even around your menses and all that,
Wow.
So, yeah, so that is a whole on
another show altogether.
Yes. But if she walks into any hospital, now by God's grace in Ghana, walk into any hospital, talk to the doctor there, even if they can't, solve it, they would refer you to someone to see you. Yes.
To our viewers, we'll be opening our phone lines soon, so you can call and speak directly to the professionals in studio. But before then, Dr. Topa, we were talking about the changes in the adolescent male.
Yes. So for the male, the most significant physical changes that we see, essentially still similar to the girls, the growth of the hair under the arm, that is in the armpit, and then around the genital area.
Okay.
The breaking of the voice is also something they see. And then significantly, in relation to their reproductive organ, there will be an increase or enlargement of their testes. So, and then following that, there will be some significant growth in their reproductive organ as well. So just the equivalent of what you see in girls, the physical changes. Boys too, you see the same thing, growth of the hair, breaking of the voice for the boys, which is more specific for the boys. And then the growth in their reproductive organ, the testes enlarges as well as the penis. So those would be the significant things aside the general increase in the body structure that you would see.
We've had issues where you hear boys having wet dreams at that phase of the, the adolescent phase, and they're confused, they don't understand what it is, and some parents don't have the information and make them feel like you are taboo. Can you give us more information about what wet dreams are, for them to understand?
Yeah. Yes, so it's something they experience, which is also very remarkable and we need to pay attention to. Maybe I wouldn't say it's like the menstruation in girls, but then it's something very significant that happens to boys.
Okay.
And just as you said, because they are confused about all the emotional changes, all the feelings they are experiencing in their body, they get confused about it and they don't know what is happening. Yes. But it's normal. It's normal for boys to have that wet dream. simply because of the changes, the physical changes you're having, the changes in the reproductive organ, which is backed by the changes in the hormones. So it's all just a preparation for the body, telling you that the body is getting to that of an adult, where one can be able to procreate and then produce another human being. Okay. But they need a lot of information, yes, because if they don't get information, and that's one of the things that have been seen, that is where it is easy for most of them to, or in other words, most of them get introduced to self-stimulation if the right information is not there, what we call masturbation. And that really is a major problem that most boys deal with. But yes, if the information is there for them to understand that it's part of the changes that are going on in the body, then they will better understand what most boys do. And I interact with a lot of teenagers. And most of them, you will realize that they go to their peers for the same information. And so it's like one blind man leaving another person. They just explore, and they may end up going in the wrong way.
The wrong way.
Yeah.
We've got to open our phone lines. The number to call is 0302 908 607. The number again is 0302 908 607. So for the boy, the young adolescent male who is going through these changes and having to deal with wet dreams and not having enough information, to the parents, what do we tell them?
Okay, so then again, going back, as parents, we've been through that stage. You were saying we don't remember, but if we look back...
We don't, honestly.
If we look back, we will remember. But
if
parents,
we remember, we won't say things like, when I was young, I didn't do this, but we clearly did it.
Well, a lot of those stories actually are not true. We know how sometimes parents just want to motivate their kids, and so they come up with all sorts of stories. But the point I'm trying to make is that every adult would have gone through the stage of an adolescent. True. The challenges may be different based on our experiences, but clearly every adult would have gone through that, and they would have had one form of challenge or the other. So first of all, parents need to understand that they've gone through and they had their own challenges.
Yeah.
The second thing is that they need to know that these changes are normal. It's part of the changes that the child is going through. So what they need to do is to prepare the child for that. So they should begin having that conversation in relation to specifically what you asked about, the wet dreams. And that is where sex education should begin. Wow. So you need to start talking to the child, and then the conversation can progress.
Okay. We have a caller on the line. We have a Rama from Takrady. Rama, thank you for calling.
Okay. Your call, afternoon. Your call has been put on hold. Please.
Hello.
Your call has been...
I think we lost the Rama. Okay. All right.
I can hear you.
Okay, Rama. Thank you for calling. What's your question, please?
Oh, I don't have a question. I want to contribute.
Okay.
I have a contribution.
Yes, please. We are listening.
When you are dealing with adolescents, it is a stage where though everybody has passed through before. You know, when they get to this stage, it is a stage of storm and stress. They usually have conflict with their friends, their parents, etc. They even don't understand what is happening to their body. They don't understand why certain things happen to them. So when you are dealing with them, it's just a way of not that you have to pamper them or etc. But you have to give them the real fact of what will happen when they do certain things. That stage is a try and error stage in the sense that as the one who was talking now said, usually they go to their friends to ask them, etc. Yes, they do go. They trust their friends more than their parents, even more than their teachers. So if you are a parent, you have to make sure that you bring them closer to you, understand them, don't shout on them. Just ask them what their problems are, and they will tell you. You know that when they need something, they behave like children. When you want them to do something for you, they want to put up that they are also adults. It's a conflict stage. They are in between. They are not children. They are not adults. And they don't understand why it is happening. So at least you tell them what you're supposed to do. I'll come back again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for calling. We appreciate your call. Before I come to ask Dr. Nima a question, Dr. Topa, for the boys,
Yes.
right, they go through all the things they go through and they need the information. At that point, a lot of, children tend to be around their mothers more. Who is the right parent to give them that information? Is it the father because he's been through it before? Or the mother who is always there but hasn't had the experience and won't know how to explain it?
Okay. So thank you very much. They need both. If both parents are there, they need both, because both parents will give them different perspectives, will share different experiences with them. They don't only need their parents, they need other adults to also come in. So there has been some studies that have been done, and one thing that has clearly been established is that human beings, and especially for adults, they yearn for that social connection. So they need that connection, which they need to have both from their parents and then from adults, other adults. But it's just that because for adults, we tend to shy away from them. We tend to feel that, okay, let's leave them to be in their own world. Let's leave them to do their own thing. And that is why they end up looking for information from other places. And of course, then they might as well just go to their peers. But then parents, mother can give information, the father, if it's also around, can give information. Sometimes they could have a broad discussion together, mother, father, everybody is sitting there. They can have that conversation. And the information should be real. We shouldn't hide anything. We shouldn't try and cover it. At that stage, they are growing. So it's either you give them the information or they will go and look for it outside. And once you give them the wrong information and they lose trust in you, the mother or the father, then that is it. They won't come back to you next time. They won't come
back to you next time. Before we go on, we have a question here. The lady says her daughter is 16, and when she goes through her menstrual cycle, she doesn't bleed normally, just her palms get swollen and red. What can we do to help?
Okay, so then again, so that's why it's a period. And the same way some can have it earlier, others can also have a delay. So for some people, the bleeding aspect of it can delay. It doesn't mean they are stunted. They still have all the other changes going on in the body. So before the physical bleeding, which is just the conclusion aspect of all the changes that goes on, there could be other changes that they could experience. So they could experience the mood swings. Some can actually have the pain and all that is associated. But it's just a phase.
We have Audrey from Tema. Audrey, thank you for calling the show.
Hello.
Hello, Audrey. You're on live.
Yes. Hello.
Hello. Hello. Let's hear from you. What's your question?
Okay, please. My question is, if you're an adolescent and your parents are oppressing you, like they don't give you your freedom, what should you do?
Thank you very much for your question. This one, I give it to you, Dr. Nimanatha. She says, if you're an adolescent and your parents are oppressing you and not giving you your freedom, what do you do?
I think basically there's a gap in communication. Probably the parents are not telling her why, and she's also not making her point clear. Usually when there's that lack of good communication between parents and adolescents, that happens. So she would have to find out why. You know, and there should be that. I say, you see, when you get to the adolescent stage, parents should not dictate, they should discuss. You know,
please repeat that for me.
During the adolescent stage, parents should learn how to discuss instead of dictate.
Okay.
Because at that point, adolescents are able to make sense out of many things. You know, so they should rather discuss. So I think that she would have to find out from the parents why. And there are some parents, you can't ask them why. You know, Mom, you said I shouldn't go to this place. Why did you say that? They may think you are disrespectful. Maybe also her approach in asking the why should also, we also have to...
She says oppression. I mean, what is her definition of oppression? Maybe, is it because she wants to go out with her friends?
It's possible what she wants to do, the parents say no. and they may have a reason. I think there should be some healthy communication between parents and adolescents. That would help.
We have Marvin from Michelle. Marvin, thank you for calling the show. What's your question? Hello, Marvin.
Yes, hello.
What's your question, please?
Please, my question is that I want to ask Doc.
Marvin is gone off. Okay, we've lost Marvin. Okay, we were talking about oppression, adolescents, and what they call oppression.
So most of the time, I think it's lack of communication. I grew up from a home where my dad, my mom, they rarely discussed anything. It was more of, this is right, do it. And you can't question it. You can't have the opportunity to ask questions. And so if you come from that background, you may see some of their side. It may be good suggestions. Your parents may have good reasons why they are saying no to your demands. But if that communication between you and your parents is not effective or healthy, then it may feel that they are oppressing you. It may be actual oppression, actually, based on disagreements on what has to happen. And I said that during the adolescent stage, there are three things. They form their own identity, and they want to be independent. They also form their worldviews about how things must go for them. You know, so there should be that healthy communication between parents and the adolescents. Otherwise, these things would happen.
It will happen all the time.
Yes.
Dr. Topa,
Yes.
so when we've spoken about the biological changes in the adolescent female and biological changes in the adolescent male.
Yes.
Now, when it comes to communicating with them, okay, I've got a call on the line before. Okay, Tina is our final caller. Tina, thank you for calling. So, can you say that again?
I'm asking how a parent can get to know if your son of 17-year-old is involved in masturbation. What are the signs?
Okay, thank you very much for your question. Dr. Nimanatha.
So one, you may never know.
You may never know.
You may never know. Because usually for those things, they hide it. And people hide it because of all the societal perceptions about masturbation. So you may never know. That is the first thing. The second is that they may hide often. So they may always want to withdraw into a secluded environment. Maybe their room, they are always in their room. They never want to come out, you know, to have conversations with people, you know, in the house. They may also be glued to their gadgets. So if they have a phone or they have a laptop or something, they may always, almost all the time, you know, be on those, especially when they're doing nothing in the house. They may want to go into that. And some of them may have pictures of those things in their room. You know, they may have pictures of women and the opposite sex or something in their room. Some may even vocalize it, depending on how far they've gone. You know, and so, but generally, you will never know.
But if you want to know, these are the things to look out for. The posters of naked women or semi-naked women.
Yes. It's not just men who masturbate. There are girls who really masturbate.
Wow.
You know, yes. So it's not just boys. And I think someone said something on another show that usually for masturbation in girls, it may start off by the fact that they may have to be washing down there all the time. So maybe whilst they wash down there, they may touch some parts of their private parts, and it may trigger some sensations, and that touching may continue. It's one of the...
Becomes exploratory.
Yes, so one of the ways they go into that. But you may never know. You may never know that they are masturbating.
So is it easier to identify, well, somewhat easier to identify with a boy or find out a boy is masturbating than for a girl?
It's difficult. It's difficult. For both, it's very, very difficult to find out what they're doing.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but definitely we are going to do a part 2 of this. And there's a lot more information biologically that parents need and psychologically, because without that, they are unable to give them the information and cannot start the education early.
Right.
They tend to leave it to a later date when the girl starts menstruating, then they want to start talking about it. And she knows it all before you are even coming to say it, or she gives that impression. And for the boys, they feel that, look, I'm all grown, I have a deep voice, what more can you tell me? It is important that we give them the right information for both the adolescent and the parent, because we want to bridge that communication gap. I mean, today, the parent is in Saboba and the child is in Accra. They live in the same house, but that's how it feels. They are unable to communicate with each other. And that's what Listen is to put out the information to be able to support them. Dr. Newman Arthur, Dr. Topa, thank you so much for coming in. Next week, our part 2, you can't afford to miss it. We're coming back your way next week, same time, with more information. This has been made possible only because Chris Sarch, Lesh Fortune Limited, Danny Tailoring, and Purple Rose Shoes have supported us. We thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to being with you. We look forward to being with you next week. But before we go, final words before the part 2 next week from Dr. Newman Arthur and Dr. Topa. Dr. Arthur.
Okay. So an adolescent is an adolescent. The brain of an adolescent is an adolescent's brain, not an adult's brain. And so parents would have to realize that adolescents are in some stage of growth. Okay. And they should rather be more interested in what they think rather than what their parents think. Okay. And they should find a healthy way of communicating whatever they want to communicate to their child. You discuss and not dictate to an adolescent.
Yes. Dr. Topa?
Yes, to add to that, I would say every adult has been an adolescent before. And we, as adults, know the peculiar challenges we had. The adolescents also have those same challenges. But what is even unique is that we are even in a different era, where now it's more about people being on their own and using more of gadgets than human relations. And so the adolescents, aside the usual problems that have existed, there are extra problems to deal with now. So the adolescent has significant challenges. And the only way we can be able to address it is by parents and all adults identifying that we've all been adolescents before, we've had challenges, and so we need to find better ways of helping them deal with their challenges.
Yes, thank you very much. Like Dr. Topa said, we've all been adolescents before. We need to be able to remember where we've been to and be able to educate them. Like I always say, no child will grow by remote control, and none of them are born with a user manual. We have to pay attention as parents and spend time with them. My name is Natalie Tejapia, and I come your way again next week, same time, 2:30, with another edition of Listen. Stay tuned and don't miss out. Thank you for joining us.
Women, they say, are the bedrock of the society and to some extent, the nation. An industrious woman or hardworking woman, either through the formal or informal sector, is definitely a force to reckon with. Obama is back. It's back to celebrate and recognize the hard work, the effort, the